Brace yourself.
Earlier this year, a peer of mine, Checkpoint Show, released a video called No Place Like Home, a dissection of how horror-themed video game environments can take on a life of their own, becoming essential characters in their worlds. Amongst the examples of Luigi's Mansion and Dead Space was a game that, to this day, is so difficult to forget, despite its fleeting, evanescent history. It's a game that I wholeheartedly appreciate, and as a result, I commend Checkpoints for the well-considered analysis. Konami's PT, as much of a myth as it feels like in 2020, was shocking, but even more so, its influence shook the game industry to its core. The amount of effort the community put into deciphering its secrets was enormous already, but the game's delisting only made its ethereal, mysterious nature all the more compelling. It's a game with a ghostly form, and I'm not just talking about the Lisa specter that wanders its hall. Despite its disappearance, PT's influence still lingers, emboldened and powerful, yet drifting amongst the genre's shadows. Whether or not PT was actually going to mean anything to Silent Hills or the Silent Hill series itself has never been entirely clear. Sure, there were some atmospheric consistencies spread across that brief little playable teaser that could have fit Silent Hill's established ethos, but it still felt distant, a separation from what had made Silent Hill such a touchstone for horror games. And I think that was intentional. Kojima is no stranger to surprises, and whatever he and Guillermo del Toro were cooking up could have very well been apparent in Silent Hill's final form, but we're still not sure. There have been countless videos and diatribes explaining whether or not Silent Hills could have been a true shock to the series' system, but the honest truth is we really don't know. Silent Hills is gone, and the only thing left behind was a sinister teaser, one drenched in eeriness and paranoia. But I think looking at PT as a standalone entity, one totally separate from the franchise it was meant to reboot, brings about just as many questions, if not more. PT, before you even enter its main hallway, moves with an unsettling vibe. The vacancy in that first grimy room, the skittering of the malformed cockroaches on the ground in front of you, it all gives off a feeling that something isn't quite right. It's a grounded, almost humble beginning, a signal that what you're about to witness isn't meant to transcend normality entirely. If anything, that's the point. The world is not that far beyond our own, it's so much closer than you think. And as you open the door and enter that picturesque hallway, one dripping with so much technical detail and visual fidelity, you realize that this teaser is so much more than meets the eye. Even in a time when photorealism has become outright fetishized in AAA game development, it's hard to look at PT and envision it without that photorealistic touch. As I've said in the past, when used with a creative or artistic vision, photorealism can be a potent tool for game design. And PT is one of those rare instances where something looking real can work towards its advantage. This is a game taking place in a thematically convincing scene, one that doesn't stray far from the actual world. It's meant to feel real, and it makes those disturbing incongruities all the more visible and all the more unsettling. Most recognizably, PT's hallway cycles, with the door at the end putting the player back at the hallway's beginning. The impossible space, a world where the area's design doesn't fit with logical real-world geometry, has been used in games for quite a while, but PT manages to make that repetition and lack of logic into something maddening. Going through the same areas over and over again might be a death knell for any other video game, but as PT moves forward, the hallway begins to take on a life of its own. The narrow hallway feels claustrophobic, as if the walls are slowly closing in on the player. The aesthetic's realistic vibe begins to fade away, giving the designers the perfect opportunity to play around with expectations and brew some truly fearful moments in the process. As the player moves forward, PT's world proves to be a fragile one, steadily coming apart at the seams. Lighting and visuals appear off-kilter, distorted audio crackles in from the radio, and over time, gruesome and disturbing set pieces make their debuts. Honestly, it's difficult to choose a single set piece as a favorite. They all have a subtle touch to them that's so hard to coherently explain. The creature in the sink is so alarming in its grotesqueness, while the shadowed figure standing beneath the light is one of purely chilling imagery. These moments punctuate each section of the game's progression in genius ways, forms that drive themselves into your psyche, making them damn near impossible to forget even once the title closes. And of course, we can't overlook Lisa, the resident of PT's world and the main enemy of the teaser. Her shocking appearance was the jump scare that shook the internet, and to no one's surprise, it became one of PT's most memorable moments. For all we know, this could be simple Let's Player bait to gauge those visceral reactions for the YouTube thumbnails, and while I can understand that perspective, in a way the Lisa jump scare was necessary. Without stimuli that explicit, PT could very well have been a tedious atmospheric adventure that was all bark, no bite. Atmosphere is valuable, but you can't coast on it. There needs to be something to light the powder keg and show just how threatening the world you explore is. I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, and some might consider it blasphemous to the greats that formed horror gaming's pantheon. But without that danger, that threatening initiative to your senses, there isn't a substantial skeleton to the mood. Of course, reliance on jump scares deserves thorough criticism. I'll openly admit that many modern horror games, most of them indie, have ground that kind of technique to dust. It doesn't take much digging to see that. However, Lisa created a monster to escape from. Anything can get tiresome through repetition, sure, but I wouldn't overlook just how unexpected that first Lisa jump scare moment was. Up until that point, PT had atmosphere you could cut with a knife. Lisa just gave it teeth. The confusing playfulness that Kojima had implemented into his past series is not absent from PT. Progression can be ruthless in its density, cryptic to the point of frustration. As much as I can appreciate Kojima rejecting the expectations of the genre, this is still a video game, and any great game needs a sense of progressive flow to keep players on the right track. In the thickest of irony, Kojima made a single hallway into something lacking coherent direction. The puzzles are pretty novel, I'll give him that, but complexity is a double-edged sword that Kojima is a bit too confident haphazardly tossing in the air. Eventually, you just want to know if you did the thing correctly. Despite being delisted by Konami in 2015 following the cancellation of Silent Hills, PT cast a long shadow on horror games. It certainly wasn't the first to take an everyday environment and make it into something terrifying, but it definitely showed what happens when that concept is given full financial faith. Since then, many games have tried to emulate PT's approach to horror. Layers of Fear took the impossible space idea and built upon it with eerie gothic architecture and a brilliant use of perspective framing. Visage used homely environment design with supernatural elements while telling a story that felt very close to PT's unraveling narrative. And Allison Road, arguably the first game announced to be directly influenced by PT, has steadily grown to mimic the original teaser's mystery, with its promising but as of yet unfulfilled existence. But with so many horror titles following in PT's footsteps, it's still so hard to escape point number one. When it comes to delisted games, PT is the one whose vacancy feels the most damning. It's the one game of this age that left such an enormous footprint on its genre while also being the one game that has the least amount of hope for a revival. Look, I've covered delisted games before, and several have ended up coming back in one way or another. But PT feels like a lost treasure, a game where the business and political circumstances are really insurmountable at this point. When it comes right down to it, I don't think PT will ever return. Its disappearance caused the game to feel ethereal, a ghost in the machine that's still terrifying us as the years go on. From its strange puzzle design to its hyper-realistic visual direction, PT drips mystery, the kind of mystery that got the entire community to work together to try and decipher every clue to its true nature. Little did we all know that these efforts were on borrowed time. PT is still a nightmare. It's still a gruesome and purely unsettling example of horror gaming's potential to shake us, to make us fear what's in the dark. We continue to find settled atmosphere and complacency in the mundane, even in the turbulent times we live in. There's safety in the familiar, so PT acting so incredibly grounded was a terrifying move. These totally off-the-wall figures, these displays of the grotesque and surreal amongst our regular everyday environments, they always feel out of place. I think we're very lucky that PT exists, even if it's a ghost without anywhere else to go. Playing it is an experience that, despite driving so many spiritual successors, has yet to be fully duplicated. We'll never have another moment like this, another moment that got everyone to step up and try to find the answers buried in the darkness. In a way, that's PT's greatest triumph. Despite it vanishing, its lingering spirit, it sustained itself on our fears and curiosities. And I think that's what any great horror work should do. Keep you captivated and terrified, even in its absence.